Hey there, this is Sean Franklin. I'm going to be doing some commentary for the CombatCon cutting competition today. So, in the first round, you can't see it, but off screen there's an official with some semaphores signaling what cuts you have to do. The objective is to perform the cut in the time the semaphore is put up, but before it's taken down. Now the cuts are scored on quality as well as how many you can do. For instance, 2 cuts ago you saw a piece of the mat went flying, which is not considered a good cut, so there'll be heavy point deductions for that. Overall, I'm doing fairly well. Okay, that was another cut deduction. And the objective here is to basically be able to move and cut at the same time. Yeah, it wasn't my best work. And then here you see the end of the round. Next up, we have RJ McKeon of South Coast Swords, guest star of sorts for this video. Of note, RJ is using a cold steel hand-and-a-half sword, despite the fact there was a much nicer Albion Cressy as a loner sword. In this format, you're supposed to be switching between the 2 mats. However, it's a little different than previous competitions, which is throwing RJ for a little bit of a loop here. It's different than what he's used to doing, which did actually lead to some pretty heavy point deductions in the first round. I see he's trying to make his cuts really tight to make up for it. Yeah, here he gets a little risky. If he misses the target, he actually incurs a fairly hefty deduction, so even though that cut gave him no points, at least he didn't lose anything for it. So here you see case of bad edge alignment. So it's definitely a lot more challenging when you have to watch and respond to the signals rather than just cutting at your own pace. And sometimes it takes a little bit to get into the groove. You see he's shaking his head because he didn't quite cut through the full mat. There's a little bit of his old cut he cut through, which is also very steep deduction. Much like that cut again. There's something when people tend to cut low rather than cutting out at the target, they bat down at it, which leads to a failed cut, as you see. And then once you make one bad cut, it's really easy to get flustered. Jesse Tucker. Shortly before this competition, he broke his right index finger. You can see there's tape on it. So he's just recovering going into this, so his cutting's not quite up to what he's expecting, as you can see from the dissatisfied face on a lot of those failed cuts. And even then, you'll see those cuts are going through, however the pieces are going flying, which is definitely an indication of a suboptimal cut. The goal is not just to cut through the tatami, it's to cut through while having the piece basically fall straight down, and then, you know, it's an indication that the cut had a very good line moving through, as opposed to, you know, just barely making it through the mat, which is not really indicative of anything. It's just some dried bamboo, which has been soaked again. So this round started off pretty good, although later you'll see it definitely wasn't my best work. So unlike the first round, you have all the time in the world you want, which should theoretically lead to some better cutting. Although, as you see, that's not always the case. As you can see there, that was a case of poor edge alignment. I've been training to throw that cut a lot more vertically and sparring to displace blades better. However, I used my old cutting line, and as a result, when it entered the tatami mat, it basically just scooped straight down and led to the failure you saw there. Part of this round is also you can only use a cut once, so there's a little bit of strategy which cuts are you going to use in which order, And then it's also really just remembering what cuts you've thrown, which can be harder than you think when you're up there throwing the cuts. Now you see, striking too close to the tip and with poor edge alignment, it basically just kind of bounced off the tatami. Not very good at all. Fortunately, I was dealing with an injury to the right wrist at this time. Most of my training had actually been with the left hand, which after the first couple cuts didn't work out, it probably would have been smarter to switch, but I wasn't thinking that far ahead at that point. I'm actually fairly happy with that one, with the false edge, but other ones, not so much. You see also a format of this competition is you can request the mats to be respiked. You get 2 respikes, and you use them however you please. While that did go through, it basically went right through the half-cut old cut line, and it really was worth nothing. So here we have RJ going again. Because of his cutting the same mat repeatedly in the first round, he's in quite a bit of a hole in terms of points, so he really has to step up this round if he wants to make it through to the top 4. See here is cutting fairly well, although he's trying to be really tight with his cuts, and he's hit quite a few mountains, which is what we call it when you intersect your old cut line with your new cut. Unfortunately, that one probably took up more mat than he wanted, although he's pretty much gone through most of his cuts already. As he's trying to remember what he has and hasn't done.
Wait, did I do right?
As he said, oh wait, did I do the right interhal? Wasn't sure, but he doesn't really get a penalty for reusing it, so might as well. Free mat. As you see there, he didn't quite cleanly cut through. To my knowledge, this is the first semi-major cutting tournament that's used the single-handed sword against the tatami mats. I could be mistaken. However, it was definitely the first time it was there at CombatCon. So definitely the quality of results were not as good as with longsword cutting.
That can be respected.
Oh, may I please have that? Yeah, step off the mat.
So when you're cutting with a longsword, the left hand is the power hand and the right hand is the control hand. So definitely having your right hand not be performing at 100% really affects your edge alignment, which is why you see a lot of these pieces being batted side to side, which is definitely an indication of suboptimal cutting. As you'll notice a lot as you're watching these horizontal cuts coming in, they tend to be very difficult to perform if they go through at all, and when they do, the piece tends to go flying, which is indicative of not the greatest cut. So that's just another reason why they don't seem to be all that popular in all the historical treatises. Is not only are they not safe martially, but their cutting ability is actually not so great. Relatively easy to baseball bat someone in a sparring match, but from an actual cutting point of view, not as good. And here we see one of the funniest moments from the tournament.